Good morning. Welcome to our Zoom worship service. We preface our service by acknowledging that the land on which our homes and church were built was not uninhabited when European settlers arrived here with their ideas of conquest and ownership. For those of us who live in Moscow, Pullman, and other nearby communities, we live on the ancestral homelands of the Nimipu, called Nez Perce by the French traders, the Palouse, and the Chichumsh, called the Coeur d'Alene. If you are joining us from another place, I encourage you to discover who inhabited or moved through the place where you now live in the times before colonization and genocide, and where those people are now. We pause and remember that we live on ground that is sacred, ground that was stolen, ground that cries out for justice and responsible stewardship. May our remembering help us find the courage to do our part to restore wholeness to the earth and all her peoples. And now let us join our voices together for our words of welcome, unison chalice lighting, and sung affirmation. Whomever you are, wherever you've come from, whatever your beliefs, whomever you love, and however bumpy your life's journey, know that you are welcome here. We hope that everyone has a chalice or a candle to light and something to light it with. Let's light our chalices together.
Hi, we're the Stewarts. I'm Lena.
I'm Julia.
And I'm Lex.
In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek and seek to share.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung in every land by every tongue.
Hello, I'm Fran Rodriguez, President of our Board of Trustees. We've been witnessing the story of our church building, but our real story is written in the lives of those with whom we share community. Excuse me. Melanie Koulouris writes, "Everyone has a story to tell, a lesson to teach, and wisdom to share. Life is a beautiful masterpiece bound together by your experiences. Open up and share your story. Become an inspiration to others. You can make a difference because you matter. You were created with purpose. Live your life with intention. Go out there and make a difference by being the difference."
Here in reverence now we gather for the blessing we have known, with a pledge to one another that we journey not alone. Joy and sorrow make us wise, kin to all that lives and dies. Love us on, love calls us on. Words and deeds of those before us, waken here to keep us strong. Blend our voices in the chorus of creation's living song. Courage bids us lift our eyes upward to the shining skies.
Now it is time for our meditation prayer, followed by some moments of silence. Today's words were written by Andrea Hawkins Camper. May we see all as it is, and may it all be as we see it. May we be the ones to make it as it should be. For if not us, who? If not now, when? This is answering the cry of justice with the work of peace. This is redeeming the pain of history with the grace of wisdom. This is the work we are called to do, and this is the call we answer now. To be the barrier and the bridge, to be the living embodiment of our principles, to be about the work of building the beloved community, to be a people of intention and a people of conscience. Our first reading is titled A History of Church, Including Yours, by Sean Neil Barron. One day your church was born. Maybe it was a gathering of saints called together for the common worship of a wrathful God, ceaselessly praying between bouts of decrying the evil of Christmas or dancing. Or maybe a few brave souls answered a notice in the newspaper, curiosity, piqued by the announcement of a religion where free thinking and tolerance were bedrocks. No matter how it happened, your church was born, a gathering of people, humble, caring, anxious, and quirky all at the same time, who covenanted to be with one another on the journey of life, death, and everything in between. And so it began. A faithful few, beautifully imperfect, called to that central task, that human task of connecting, loving, and serving. It was just a baby, and yet it was thrust deep into the human condition, tasked to hold minds and souls, bodies and hearts along the roller derby of disease and birth, infighting and joy, and Christmas pageants, sometimes all of those at the same time. They gathered to hear the world broken open for insightful sermons, rejuvenating music, and a community whose fierce devotion to each other's well-being rivaled a mama bear's for her cubs. But it wasn't always like that, of course. There were the trying times, and I don't just mean Phyllis or Jack, those stubborn but lovable souls who inhabit the netherworld of committee meetings. No, I mean trying times, when the church almost split in half over the war or integration, or when the mill left the town vacant, or when the minister crossed that line and the people couldn't speak about it for decades. But somehow you were still here, still on the town common. New people came and they changed things that nobody noticed as it happened, until suddenly it was hard to even recognize it anymore. It was a hard moment, a tearful moment. And other things changed too. The proclamations about God, once heard loud from the pulpit, softened. Wrathful became loving, distant became intimate, mandatory became optional. After the war, the nursery and RE classrooms were overflowing. Each baby dedicated reminded the church of the incredible beauty of life and the gift this community, all huddled around baby, would bestow upon this child. The history of your church is more a story of determination of love to break forth than it is about the tie-dye or chalices, sermon, discussions, or social justice committee meetings. The history of the church is a history of human enterprise, evolving in its sights and sounds, yet revolving always around its core. The history of your church is the gift of potential and momentum, of baggage and personality. The history of your church is the launch pad from which you spring into action or disarray. Each day your church is born. Now we are going to listen to the stories of some who have long served our church community. We will hear the voices of Sarah Hollop, Ralph Nielsen, Dwayne and Janet DeTemple, and Bill and Joanne Webb.
I'm Sarah Hollop. I've been a member since 1985, been a member of this church. We weren't even called the Uucp back then, but I'm not sure what we were. Unitarian Fellowship I think. And I'm a retired teacher in the public schools. I've taught special education for 25 years. And I was still teaching when I joined the church. My husband and I joined. We just attended a couple times and right away we joined.
Oh, when in our UUCP history do you think we did something important or special?
Well, one thing was that they kind of called themselves a fellowship, but they bought this building that have been in for all these years. And once there was a building, a lot of people wanted to join, and we were some of them. Before that, the fellowship met over in Pullman, and so that was a big milestone, was purchasing that building of our own, and a lot of new people joined at that time. Pat Scott, whom you know as an elder in our church. I guess I'm an elder too. Pat, though, and her husband joined at that time. I remember.
Can you remember a time when we struggled, and how did we deal with challenges?
One time I remember was that we chose a new minister, and it was unanimous choice, but it turned out to be a choice that didn't play out really well. Things were divisive, and so that was a tough time.
And how did we deal with that?
The minister had to be asked to leave, and so it was tough on everybody. Yeah. And we lost some members, but we regained some. So.
And we moved on.
And we moved on. We certainly did.
What do you want our congregation to remember about itself as we go forward?
We're a very welcoming congregation, and we are strong enough to get through tough times. It's even been a tough time during this construction and with the pandemic happening at the same time. But we're strong as ever. It feels to me like all these Zoom services have been amazingly successful, and I think many of us have looked forward to doing it. We've learned to do it and gone on and had success.
When did you become a part of the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Palouse?
I was in June the 1st, 1979. My late wife, Judy, she was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan, to Dutch Reformed parents. Mm-hmm. They were of the liberal branch, so they didn't press it too hard. Mm-hmm. There are two branches of Dutch Reformed.
Right. So, did she discover the church, or did you, or?
She was talking about, after we lived here, and she was talking about she would like to visit some kind of a church, a very liberal church, and I had just read that the Unitarians were going to move from Pullman over here, and they got the old Swedish church.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Yes.
So,
I told Judy, you come along with me Sunday morning, and you'll find exactly what you want.
And you did?
Yes, and we did.
So, when in our UUCP history, what are some things we did that you think were important or special for you?
Well, I could live without a church, but Judy was a more sociable type than I am, and so it was with Judy's background, and so that I said, well, you come along with me Sunday morning, Judy, and I think you'll find exactly what you want. Mm-hmm. And she did.
Mm-hmm. What were some times in the church that the church really struggled? Can you think of any?
I know there were some.
I know I came when there was that, should we have 2 services or 1 service?
Oh, yes.
Was that one you remember as being a tough time?
Yes, well, we would have come to the first service because we both like to get up in the morning.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And we were perfectly happy to see the second service go by the boards. It just didn't work out. They didn't have enough congregation in either service.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What do you want the congregation to sort of remember about itself? What are some of the good things you hope that the congregation takes forward?
Well, yes, well, as I already mentioned, it was my late wife Judy found exactly the kind of church that she was interested in. And of course I got interested as well for social reasons. And I had been up at Edgewater, BC. I was raised, well, I was the oldest of 5. And we had a...
Did you go to church when you were a kid?
Well, we went to a Danish home church from time to time. But my father was not interested in religion. And my mother broke away from them because they were always wanting money.
So let me ask you.
So then
this is a good detail.
Okay.
Yeah.
we broke away and we joined the local Anglicans, Episcopalians.
Oh.
And we immediately rose to the top level of the social order in a small town of Edgewater.
Oh, because Anglicans.
And we were the Anglicans.
So how did you become the UUCP's resident Bible scholar? You know so much about the Bible.
Oh, yes. Well, I was always an avid reader. And, well, because we were raised in a sort of my parents' acquaintances were Christian. So I thought, well, fine, I'll read the Bible, find out what it says.
You must have a really good, I mean, you can cite chapter and verse.
Almost. I'm getting old now.
Well, to me, that's been, and having you as part of the community, like a liberal Bible scholar has just been such a rewarding.
Oh, yes. Yes, I don't think I ever went to Doug Wilson's church. But he didn't have a church when I came here.
Really? He was at U of I a little bit, wasn't he? I don't know if when you were there, didn't he get a master's?
I think he started in 72 and he came to Moscow in 64.
Oh.
So a little bit before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But he put Doug Wilson out of the letter writing business. Quote, unquote, Ralph Nielsen. It's true.
Yeah.
He doesn't write in the papers anymore. And you can go back to Moscow Daily News, look up his name for the last few decades, and you can see his letters.
I have.
Oh, okay.
I
okay.
know his letters.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
I know his
Okay.
letters.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, I can beat Bibles with the best of them.
Because Janet and I came up from California in 1970, but the church at that time was at a low point, was not meeting. And the church kind of rejuvenated at the end of the 70s. And Janet and I signed the guest book, I believe, in the spring of 1977. So that stretches back. You can do a little arithmetic on that, and that's a long haul. So we've been in the church community for a good many years. We've seen so much happening over those years. It's really fun to talk about it and think about the history.
Thank you so much, and congratulations for being one of the people who have known us and been part of us for so long. So in thinking about all of that UUCP history, what do you think of as our triumphs or our successes? What was something important or special that we did?
Well, certainly getting the church back on its feet in the end of the 70s was huge. For a while, we met over at the Campus Christian Center at the UI campus, but then we moved to the Koinonia House at the WSU campus. It's a building that's since been torn down. It's an old, large house. Even then, we kind of filled up the living room. That's where we held our services. So we began to grow and think about how to proceed. A huge plus was a half-time minister. This was our first minister. Harold Rosen came to us at the end of the 70s. By the early 80s, we were looking actually for a new building. And one of our members, Gene Jacobson, discovered, after we looked unsuccessfully for quite some time, that the senior center, the old Swedish Lutheran church in Moscow, had come up for sale. She bought it. And of course, later we had to approve the sale to the church with the board meeting, and there we were. So at the time, the church seemed huge to us. It had an oppressive balcony, and during the summer of 1985, we totally refurbished that building. The floor was totally black in the sanctuary with a shuffleboard. Apparently there were a couple of them. We found another one recently in the current remodeling process. But the floor was totally black. Cliff Robertson spent probably 10 miles of walking or more with the sander in front of him restoring that facility. So that was really huge. It's kind of interesting to think about one of the first projects was to tear out an old balcony. Now, of course, we're putting in a new balcony. This is an amazing transition over those years to go from one balcony to a safe one. The old one had a kind of a two weird steps that are totally dangerous to get up to, and now we're remodeling it in a very safe and wonderful way. So that was a huge step to move into the new building.
That was certainly a triumph. It must have
Absolutely.
been so exciting to be a part of that. After we moved into that building, how did things go after that? Was everything always smooth sailing?
No, of course not. That's not the way organizations operate, I'm afraid.
No.
But we've had other ministers. Harold left us in the, I guess, late 80s. We had a number of other ministers that came to us. Lynn Unger was one. Lynn was very poetic and wonderful. We've recently seen her with one of our Zoom services. Her language is poetic throughout, so you may have noticed that. And we've had other ministers as well. And of course, currently we have a wonderful minister with Elizabeth. I think we all appreciate her. So there was one down moment when we hired a minister. Unfortunately, we discovered it was a mistake for various reasons, but it was a minister that thought Sunday services should be theater productions, and that doesn't work. They need to be more personal and interactive with people's current feelings and issues, and it was totally not in the Sunday service program. So that was a mistake for us, and we eventually came out of that.
What did we do? How did we get out of it? How did people come up from that?
We had some help from the national organization, but it was, there were a lot of meetings with people to discuss how to proceed. It was difficult, that's for sure.
As we go forward with our new building and anticipating the future that's going to bring, what do you want people to know or remember, what do you want people to know about this congregation?
I think one transition in a positive direction we've made is to not just talk about things, but do things. For example, we had a guest to the church, Michael Durrell, I think was his name, a few years ago, that pointed out that a church, one of the most important things they can do is contribute. And if you're in a position to contribute, do it. It feels good. It helps so many other people that's where the Month of Sundays program originated. So over the last, I don't know how many years, quite a few years now, 100% of the Sundays offering goes to local organizations that support our goals. I think that's absolutely awesome. A lot of money's come in. It doesn't seem to hurt the bottom line of the church program. We're doing it. So that's fantastic. Another real plus is Family Promise, another organization that's kind of between Moscow and Pullman communities, again, to help homeless families. And we like to think, oh, we're in this ideal world, but no, we've had a steady clientele to help out with families with often very young children. So that's been, again, a real plus, I think.
You sound pretty proud of the things our church has accomplished.
I think especially in recent years, we've really upped the ante about kind of backing up our principles with real action that matters to so many people.
I'm Janet D. Temple. Dwayne and I have lived in Pullman since 1970, which is before the earth cooled. We began to be interested in the UUs in the area because there was a concentration of people in the math department who began to meet again after the church just kind of dissolved, apparently over the Vietnam War. This is in the Harriet Dodge and those and the Rounios and the Caldwells and all those people. But this nucleus of people in the math department started meeting on Sunday evenings in people's houses, and that kind of grew until there was a group big enough that we started meeting at the Campus Christian Center at UI. And then we moved to the K House, and by that time we were up to maybe a whopping 25 to 26 people a Sunday.
And the K House was in Pullman?
Yeah. It's that physical structure isn't there anymore. Yeah. And we kind of evolved with the growth of the arising again of the Unitarian Church of the Palouse. And so we've been on lots of rides with other Unitarians. Person had to stay there. It's not like we're having a DRE at all.
Right.
And I don't think many UU churches had DREs at that time.
Yeah.
This was the beginning of the 80s, you know, or the late 70s. And Unitarians were more famous for hot tubs than anything else. And also the Webbs and we and Karen Richmond and her kids and her first husband were the only nuclear families. The rest of the people were either people whose children were gone, or who were still single. So we had to fill our own niche, basically, and so that was an interesting time. What was the rest of your question?
Well, I was asking about accomplishment. So
yeah, well, I thought that getting that rolling was probably one of the accomplishments that allowed us then to follow through with finding a half-time minister, which was kind of a miracle because Harold also then was a graduate student in the philosophy department at UI, and kind of seeing ourselves as a viable fellowship, and then that evolved to actually looking at churches, and it's amazing to me that we had the courage to go through with letting Gene Jacobson put the down payment on that building. I mean, that was, when I think about the monumental things that could have happened if it had gone wrong. But and then fixing the building up was another interesting experience. But it was, in fact, Jill said when our oldest daughter was just here, and she said, well, I remember being able to go over there and they let me pry wainscoting off the wall with a crowbar, and I was only 10. So it was interesting to hear her historical perspective. But
and thinking back about all of the things the church has done and accomplished, are there things that you want people to remember or know about the congregation as we go forward?
I think it's good to remember the people that glued us back together at the beginning. And I think we owe a debt of gratitude to Harold Rosen, you know, who was a real character. You know, we kind of had to invent as we went according to our needs. And I'm glad that we were a Unitarian fellowship because that was allowed. And that was before the UUA had much sway with anybody. And so we were just kind of out here doing our own thing. But I think the pivotal thing was the building. That really made a big difference. And from then we grew much more rapidly. And hiring a full-time minister was another time when I thought, you know, okay, we're real. Yeah. And not that we were always all in agreement, as Unitarians rarely are, but it was there was always this tug of war between people who wanted a purely intellectual experience and a spiritual experience. And I think those of us in the middle who wanted some of each managed to hang in there through that. And by then the Unitarian Universalist Association was getting to be a lot more helpful for churches in our stage of development. And
I'm Joanne Bill, and this is Bill.
Yeah.
And we moved to Pullman first back in 1969. We got involved in the church when we first heard about it in 1976, when they were just enter in anywhere, anytime. When they were just thinking about a minister, maybe we should have a minister. It was just strictly a fellowship of people getting together before that. And so the first year, 76, it was just an introduction to Harold Rosen as a possible minister. And then he was hired at the end of that year, and he came, if I get anything wrong, tell me. He started in 77,
And we joined that same year. And we have 2 kids. At that time, they were 7 years old and 3 years old, I guess. And we'll take it from there. You say a little more about that.
Well, we were a small group then. We met over at the WSU campus at the Koinonia House and stuff, which we just met on Sundays. And, you know, everything was volunteer until we finally hired Harold. But everything else that we did was just, you know, totally volunteer work. I know Joanne, well, I taught the RE a lot, and Joanne was actually kind of almost the director because it was a very small program at that time. And, you know, eventually we hired, you know, an RE person for a couple hours a week, and then a few more hours, and then eventually half-time, and, you know, just moved up. And we've seen a lot of growth over the years and stuff like that. So.
And thinking back over all of the years, what do you think are some of the things that are most important that our church has achieved, or what you're most proud of?
Well, I think probably the first move was getting a church, because we were just renting this building at the K House on Sunday morning. And so we decided to take the big jump, and we started searching for buildings that could be. We ended up buying the church here in Moscow, and we moved it there in 1985. It was 10 years later or so. And it was all volunteer, fix it up. It was in bad shape at the time. Hadn't been used for a church in many years, I think. That was really a great time. Really, people got to know each other, and we all worked together. And I thought that was one of our fine moments.
Definitely,
yeah. And so again, let's see, 85. Well, that was my first year to be a secretary. I think maybe that was our first secretary when we moved into the church, and we had a little office. And so we got a desk and a computer and a few things, and I was part-time. I just basically at that time it was just do the newsletter. In fact, that might even have been done from home. Now that I think of it.
Yeah, I think we were doing it.
We were doing it years before that, just to have something going. Yeah. So that's the early days. I don't know, we could keep going till the present, I guess.
Are there other things that you look back at and say, wow, I'm so glad we did that, or I'm surprised we could do that?
Yeah, of course, we're buying the yellow house about 5 years later, I think, after we bought the church, and then the growth, and then just all of the projects that we've, you know, taken on at the church, the working with the Family Promise thing, and you know, now our summer meal program for the school kids, for weekend food for kids, and there's just so many things that we've gotten involved in and seen the church grow.
And I think those are some of the maybe most important and valuable things too, how we got involved with the community and by getting Family Promise going. What was the other one? Well, you said with the schools.
Yeah.
And then we started the month of Sundays, and that was the financial part of it, you know. And I think I was skeptical at first. How can we just give our money away, you know, Sunday morning money? We need that money, but as it turns out, that was one of the more important things that we did too, and that's been great. Choosing a different charity, local charity, with each month and giving donations to that. So I think those have been really special.
What struggles have we had over the years, and how have we dealt with those?
We haven't really had. Well, I mean, everything, you know, is somewhat of a struggle. You know, like, you know, financially, how do we give our money away to the month of Sundays? Well, we did it, and just and we've gone on and so forth. The only kind of crisis I can remember is many years ago, the minister that we hired, we had to ask him to leave halfway through the year. Yeah. It just didn't work out, and that kind of tore the church apart a little bit and stuff, because some people wanted him to go, some people wanted him to stay. We were not real. I mean, we were very active in the church, but not active in things like hiring the minister or deciding that the minister is going to go because that was a board decision and so forth. So, we were just seeing that sort of stuff on the sidelines. Personal experience in things like that, of course, the transition to a new minister is always a big one and a really important one because that really guides the church. And the one that I was kind of closely involved is when I first took over, I was a board president for a year.
2010, I think.
Yeah, I think it was 2010. And, you start in January, and right at that time, our minister at that time, Kale Rice, announced that she was going to resign, in June. And of course, that was not enough time to go out and hire a settled minister. And so the church decided that we would go and try to hire an interim minister for a period of a couple of years. But we were even late to start that because the announcement of her resigning came so late. And so we had to really quick get together a search committee for the interim minister, and they didn't have much time, and so you had to find people who were willing to work really fast and really hard and get this done. And so I was involved behind the scenes kind of there, and we did, and they found a good interim minister who was really experienced and stuff for that. Marlene Walker, and and she was good for the church for a couple years. But then not only as soon as she arrived, we had to form another search committee for the settled minister, because that's a job that really takes more than a year of searching if you're going to do a good job at it. So now find another search committee, find people who were willing to put in all of this work for over a year, and people who could work together, and so forth. And, so we fortunately found some great people. From everything I've heard, it was a really close-knit group who worked wonderfully together, and they found Reverend Elizabeth for us. So again, not a time of crisis or whatever, but all of the things that were going on behind the scenes to get all of this done. I think a lot of people don't realize all of the things that need to be done behind the scenes.
I think that can be very true. So thinking back about all of our church history, what kind of church are we? How would you describe us?
Well, okay, I mean, just to kind of continuing this thing, we always seem to have the people who are willing to step up and do what needs to be done, no matter what it is, whether it's buying a new church. This whole project, of course, was the new building, which we're all really excited about, but being able to decide that, and the people who were willing to work on raising the money and doing the building, we're overseeing it. How are we going to handle all this? Starting out the month of Sundays, we've always had people who were willing to step up and do it, and we've just seen, the church continue to grow year after year. Ups and downs a little bit, but mostly ups, I think, for us. It's been a really good group to work with. That's the kind of people that I like.
From the light of days remembered, burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our minds and souls ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
Our closing words are entitled Brick by Brick by Reverend Meg Barnhouse. All summer, workers have been building a brick wall along the road by my neighborhood. Against the brutal heat, they stretch a tarp overhead to get a little shade. I've watched them take bricks in their dusty brown hands one by one, butter them thickly with mortar, line them up, and tap them down row by row. One man who looks to be in his 70s is the leader. His skin is the color of bittersweet chocolate. His beard is gray. Slender and tall, he moves from one group of bricklayers to the next, reaching and bending, looking like a heron in a marsh. When he pauses, he stands very straight. I see him teach the others how to do the work. He stoops over to look at a line of bricks, hands on his thighs, inspecting the work. Sometimes as I drive by, I see him put his hand on the back of the person he's teaching. Often they are both smiling. He looks like he loves what he's doing. I wonder how he can love building walls day after day, handling bricks, teaching the art of laying bricks. Is it the teaching he loves? Seeing how his students learn, what their styles are, how their work shows their character? Does he love the wall itself? Does he know about when it'll be done? Does he look forward to seeing it finished? Or does he love the process? The feel of the bricks in his hands, the squish of the mortar, the challenge of making the symmetry of pillars and arches, the geometry of it. I think from the look on his face that he loves the process. I imagine that he never thinks about the end of the project, the completion of the wall. I think he will go on to the next wall as if it were just a continuation of this one, then the next one and the next, and never be bored. I want to be like that. And I am, I guess. In my job as minister, the bricks are stories. I hear stories of family and work, stories of loss and reconciliation, stories of rejection and disaster, illness and healing, birthing and dying. I tell stories every Sunday and in between, teaching, challenging, confessing, inviting people to learn and laugh and think. Brick by brick, story by story, we build the church, seeing the patterns, the symmetry, the plain joy of setting one story on another, sustained by the strong and beautiful structures they make. We will never be finished. It's okay. Now our musical benediction.
There is a love
Please join me in extinguishing our chalices with the words shown on your screen. We extinguish this chalice that it might grow gently in our hearts. May it light our paths as we leave this place. May it guide our way until we are together again. Thank you all so much for coming today. As we see our building near its completion and start looking to the future and thinking about who we'll be, it's a great time to look back and think about where we came from, who we have been, and remember how far we've come as a church. It's exciting times, and I hope you enjoyed this brief tour through the history of our church.